Hello, hello, beautiful listeners. Let's do this. So, in this podcast, overall, all of the Design Yourself podcast episodes, my commitment is to sit with you in the shape shifting realities that we live and lead in and offer some hope. I really do believe that through small shifts in our mindsets, in the way we talk about our story, our narrative, in our clarity of purpose and vision, that we can lead differently. As an executive coach and team facilitator, I am focused in my professional life on accelerating these shifts with my clients. And in this podcast, my hope is to do the same for you. Each week, I am sharing practical resources and reflection prompts to spark your own best thinking so that you can imagine what you really want and you can figure out how to lead with your vision each and every day. In this week's episode, we are talking about the topic eliminating distractions. And that is because so often the thing that can hold us back from both seeing what we really want and be in the action of moving towards it is that we are just swimming in a world that wants to grab our attention. Sometimes we're conscious of it. Frequently, we don't even see that we have allowed this real gift of our attention to go elsewhere. And other times we know we're doing it, either because we're overwhelmed, we're scared, there's something that's holding us back. So, in today's episode, I'm going to offer up 3 simple questions. I'm going to share some perspective, some of my own experience as I offer these questions to you. And I trust that you will take these questions and see what's a shift I can make? What's a way that I can eliminate the distractions that might be holding me back? Okay, so let's go straight to it. First, level setting. You know, I love a good definition. What do I mean by a distraction? By distraction, I mean a thing that prevents someone from giving their full attention to something else. So it's a thing that prevents me from giving my attention to something else. Okay, so that's basic. This is what I mean by a distraction. And we're going to talk about how do I get rid of it. Here's your first question. Do you know what you want to pay attention to right now? If I were to ask you how you're shaping your week, this day, this year, this life, do you know what you want to pay attention to? Do you know how the way you're spending your time today is connected to that thing that matters most, the thing you want to pay attention to? Here's the point of view I want to share. By the way, if you are, just as I'm asking, like, do you know what you want to pay attention to right now? If you're like, oh my God, I don't know, that's okay. Breathe in, breathe out. I will drop in the show notes, which you can find the link to wherever you're listening to this podcast in the show description. Um, I will put in there an episode that invites you to think about what is most important. So I'll connect you to that. So you can come back to that. You don't have to leave now. If you want to, go ahead, go check it out. But it's okay. So like breathe in and out if you're like, I don't know. When we quiet the white noise, which is what I find I'm often doing as a coach, is just holding the space to allow my clients to let go of the things that, again, distractions, the things that clutter their mind, and like breathe them out and sit in the knowing of what your spirit, what you on your inside, what you when you close your eyes and let everything else go and you ask yourself, What do I want to pay attention to? You know the answer. Here's the so that's magic. Like that's something I see. And we often distract ourselves or unconsciously sabotage ourselves from moving towards what we want to pay attention to because we're actually not focusing on that thing. And so here's an example. Here's a pulling from the my own personal path. I remember it was I have three beautiful children, and I remember in those, in which, of course, like it does for any family, disrupted where how our what our finances looked like. I changed my job. I left my corporate job after the birth of my first child, was building Point Road Studios, and it was a building phase. So my income had changed dramatically. Uh, also now, and then one, then two, then three children entering the scene. And I think it was somewhere in the era of uh, baby number three was on the way or recently on the scene. And my partner Colin and I were really being scrappy about how do we budget. And I and this was the light of this for me. I mean, we were always fine, so it was never a question of, will we be able to pay the mortgage? But things were tight. We weren't saving much or anything, and so we knew it was this bridge building period. And the thing we were focusing on was our budget, and what I was looking at was all the ways we could tighten things up on what I would call the fringes. I wasn't thinking of it that way at the time, but I was like, okay, I want to make sure that our money is aligned with what matters to us. And so in the grocery store, what are we spending money on? And I had never thought about, again, real place of privilege. In my previous professional adult life, I was not sweating what I would when I went to the grocery store. I wasn't thinking about it. As a result, I can tell you we spent a lot of money, and there was waste. There was food waste. There was other waste that happened as a result. And so there was something in it for me of like, well, I'm aligning the values and the money, so I'm focusing there. But the big picture thing that mattered most is, are we saving as a family for the things we care about? In particular, are we setting ourselves up for our future? And we were thinking about things like, what do we want to put aside for retirement? How can we start to carve out funds to be able to have to set aside money for our children to go to college? And so we're just thinking through these things. Here's the back to that question. Do you know what you want to pay attention to right now? What I If I lifted up, I could take myself to, I want to make sure that our family is saving for the future. But I was so into the action of, how do I manage this budget so that we aren't overspending? And I remember the real shape shifting moment for me on the budget was when my partner Colin said, you know, we're spending a lot of time. You, Sharon, are spending a lot of time focusing on these very small details of things like, how much money are we spending at the grocery store? But if we really wanted to say, how are we saving money for the future, and are we spending our money on the things that matter most, both now and in the future, we would be looking more at the big rocks. Like, are we overspending on, like, and if you looked at the big rocks of our expenses, it was primarily our mortgage and money going to the upkeep of our house. And it was daycare. See three children all in daycare. And I'm having like a I'm having a triggered reaction to, like, oh yeah, I remember that time. It was also wonderful, uh, but financially very stressful. So the point is, I could micromanage, don't buy this orange, weigh how much, or buy this more affordable fruit, not this other one, all day long. But it wasn't really going to inflect the big picture. And that's what I want you to think about. Do you know what you want to pay attention to right now? Okay. And follow-up questions will come, things like, as I said before, what do you want to pay attention to? And if you do know what you want to pay attention to right now, how's that going? Notice it without judgment. Okay, that's first question. Question number two: what sight line or perspective will steward you on this path, will steward your growth? What do I mean by that? I get that's a little bit more of an abstract question. What I mean here is when we're paying attention to something, there's a way in which we can pay attention to it. Are we 30,000 feet up in the air looking down at it? I need that kind of perspective, that kind of sight line. Is it that I need a magnifying glass, like it's right in front of me, but I need to see it closer up? I need that kind of perspective. What is the perspective that will steward you on this path, that will steward your growth, that will move you forward? And a really great way to ground yourself in this is to think about a place where you are a beginner. And if there is no place in your life right now where you are a beginner, I would encourage you to seek it out. Like, try something you've never done before, just to be in the space of not being the expert. Us grown-ups get real accustomed to honing our expertise, and there is so much to be learned by being a beginner, including it really helps us sharpen our edges of what do we want to pay attention to? What's the thing I need to learn now? And I'm gonna talk a little bit about, to illuminate this, both what to pay attention to and from a place where I'm a beginner, and that is when it comes to skiing. Friends, I am going skiing every weekend, usually twice, Saturday and Sunday. And I'm set up now that if the schools are closed, I'm asking myself, can I sneak away for part of the day with the family and go ski? Like, is that something that fits in? So I'm skiing a lot more than I've ever skied. And by skiing a lot more than I've ever skied, I mean the first time I ever skied, which is a story for another podcast, maybe one about fear, was after the birth of my first child. She was 4 months old. So she's 10 now. So my first time was a decade ago, and I didn't ski again until 2019. So it's only in the last few years that I've returned to skiing. I didn't ski through the pandemic until this year. So this is my return. All this to say, coming into this winter, I had skied certainly less than a dozen times. And only one instruction class when I first went, which was like, and how do you put on these very complicated boots? And how do you get your feet in the skis? And how do you get back out of the skis? And that's like for an hour with other people. And that's it. So little instruction. Going down the greens, which if you know skiing is beginning slopes. It's not the like learner slope, but it's beginning slopes. That's where I was, and pretty much I was nervous, and every time I got out, I was trying to get my sea legs. Okay, back to sightline and what I'm learning this time. So this year, because I'm going more frequently, I am really practicing this beginner skill of skiing, and because I have an excellent instructor who is my friend, thank you, Cassidy, who's teaching me how to ski, also a coach and very good at breaking things down. She has helped me see what to focus on and when. So this is what I mean by sightline. So when I first started skiing down the greens with her, she had me focusing on how do I turn. And, people were telling me things like trust your edges. And I was like, I don't have any idea what my edge is. I can't feel my edge. I understand that my skis have edges to them, but like which side of the ski are we talking about? Which ski? It like didn't make sense to me. But I could understand how to turn hard and not focus on anything else. So now I'm just going down the hill, like cut this way now, cut this way. And and we built up. So like then there's other steps to what so that got easy enough, and I said, "Okay, now let's focus on like looking how to turn, not just like turn one side and stop, but as I get to that other side, I turn so that there's more of a fluid motion happening." So now I'm paying attention not just to like how I turn, but how to turn from one side to another, more of a flow. So I'm paying attention to that. What I noticed in all of these pieces, without taking you through all the building blocks of me learning to ski, there's many micro lessons I've been learning every day, and then having to unlearn some of the ones I learned, because I was ready to take what I'd done and integrate it into a new way of doing it. What I can tell you is that the primary thing I'm looking at when I'm skiing up until this weekend, the primary thing I've been looking at is what is right in front of me. This is amazing. Again, like take skiing and apply it to life. Like just focus on what's right in front of me. Now, I'm not looking down the mountain. By the way, it's much less scary when I'm not looking down the mountain. Um, I'm just focusing on how do I get to this next turn? How do I approach like the start of this hill? Not how do I get down the whole thing, but like this piece, because that's what my technical skills could help me with. That's how I could keep moving forward. Goal, get down the mountain. So that's what I was focusing on. This week, and by the way, I know you're dying to know, I have advanced to the blues. I can go to the top of the mountain now. Very proud of myself. Me and my 5-year-old on the same day went down the top of the mountain blue run. And I think that's awesome. I'm like, yeah, you and me, babe, we're learning together. So I, this weekend, got to shift my sight line, and it happened through a drill. Again, thanks, friend Cassidy. She had me hold my poles. I've seen kids on the mountain doing this with their instructors, holding my poles out in front of me and skiing. So what happens when I was holding my poles out in front of me is I literally can't, my sight line had to change because, and imagine like hold your hands in front of you and imagine there's an object in your hands. What does it do? It shifts your sight line up. You can't look down because you're blocking the view, looking down because your hands are out and you're holding it's at a minimum, you're looking just past where your hands are. And when you're on the pitch of a mountain, what happened for me is now I'm looking like maybe 20 feet ahead. My perspective literally shifted. And what it allowed me to focus on was remember those edges? What does it feel like? Not what am I seeing it to be? So I got this new body feel of how I'm moving down the mountain on skis, literally by putting my hands out in front of me. What I want you to think about is when you go back to where you want to focus on, where you want to focus right now, what is most important to pay attention to right now, to move forward right now. What is the sight line or perspective that will steward your growth on this path, right? All this ski talk takes us back to that second question. And to know what might serve you this week could change next week, but don't get distracted by something that you want to focus on 3 steps down if where you are right now requires a different sight line. If you want to be an incredible and inspiring team leader, and you see that as someone who is coming into a team meeting with a certain kind of presence and sharing really great ideas and bringing the team along with you, but where you are right now is in the throes of a crisis, you got to focus on the crisis. You can't come in and add new things and not acknowledge the thing that's right in front of you. What is the sightline or perspective that will steward your growth? Okay, last question. How do you quiet the white noise, right? How do you eliminate the distractions? This is when you're when you're clicking play on a podcast on eliminating distractions, I imagine this is the question that many of you are wanting to answer for yourself. Well, here's some guidance. First, go to the first two questions. You eliminate distractions by knowing what you want to pay attention to right now. Yes, it's great if it connects to other things and you can see the integration, but if you have to pick one thing, just what attention now? Where do I place it now? What do I place it on now? Okay, so that's first. Then, at what vantage point, at what perspective am I placing that attention? Right? So answer those first two questions. If you're answering those first two questions, you're going to be well on your way to eliminating distractions, to quieting the white noise. And here's a few other things that you can think about as you think about how else can I quiet the white noise. It might be setting up boundaries. So if you know, and you will, I know you will, if you know this is the thing that matters most, then how do I set up boundaries to allow me to focus on that thing and nothing else? It might be the boundary might be that I don't look at those other things. It might be that my potential, the things that distract me away from that thing tend to come from, I'm thinking in an uh, IMs I'm getting, or messages I'm getting, emails I'm getting, Slack I'm getting, Teams messages I'm getting, right? Wherever it's coming from. But in your work lives, where's your attention getting pulled from? Well, do you quiet that for a certain part of your day? That could be a boundary. So, what boundaries might support you? That might be something that you're doing. It might also be that you get rid of being asked about certain things. So, for example, if you know that you are always, what's really important is that you start your day with a meditation and writing out what your day is going to look like and really imagining it happening in the way you want it to, then a boundary might be that your phone is out of, like, it is nowhere near you, and you have a different way to listen to the meditation, or maybe the meditation is something you're doing on your own, so that you don't, in that first part of your day, you are just able to do those two things before you allow yourself to see how, oh, I missed a text, oh, I emails have come in, oh, I'll just take a look at this thing on social media. So that might be a boundary you set up. So how do you quiet the white noise? You might be thinking about boundary setting. Other things you might think about for quieting the white noise is just building practices that allow you to come back to what matters. Now, it might be you've heard me talk before on the podcast about meditation. It could be meditation. It could be that you have an accountability partner, and an accountability partner allows you to come back to that. Then that can be a friend, it can be a family member, it can be a coach. But this is the touch point of when you meet for lunch on Wednesdays, you're both talking about this, like it's the return to the thing that matters most. So that can help you quiet the white noise. Um, and the last thing I'll say, and there's so many things you can do tactically. And by the way, if you're like, but the thing I'm really struggling with is like, how do I do this tactic? Message me, like, let me know. I want to hear like what's showing up for you on that. What I can say is that on an emotional level, I want you to think about, like, what is the emotion that's going to serve me as I quiet the white noise? And grace is a word that has come up for many of my clients, or a variation on that theme: peace, quiet, um, love. And when I think about grace as a way to move through quieting the white noise, it just allows for that acknowledgement that, you know what, I'm human, and um, and I am noisy sometimes. I am messy sometimes, and that's also okay. And how do I keep moving, even knowing that that is true? So That's what I want you to think about. How will you quiet the white noise? Only you can answer that for yourself, and hopefully this will give you some ideas to get you started. Okay, friends, that's what I wanted to share with you today. As always, please know that wherever you are, I am rooting for you, cheering you on, and holding my deeply held belief that there is nothing stopping you. So go on ahead and get after whatever it is that you really want.